The Center for Copyright Integrity presents Coffee at Clockers. Horse racing is a playing field where all levels out in 6 seconds or less. Horse racing is where money doesn't crown a king, nor does scratching pennies to get by make one a loser. The equalizer is royalty, equine royalty, a blue-blooded, four-legged beauty at the heart of the sport of kings, the thoroughbred, the most glorious of all God's creatures. Daily, even before the sun peeks over the crest of the San Bernardino mountaintops, life stirs in the valley below. In the dark soup of mist, listen carefully. Sounds are heard. In the haze of the morning cool, shapes in the distance begin to emerge from the fog. Hazy outlines begin to take form. Small, dark dots become larger, darker dots, becoming ears, legs, tails swishing, horses with riders aboard. 2 is 1, or 2 or 3 dots becoming distinguishable as riders, bug boys, and trainers, separating where their paths diverge. Someone calls, "Riders up!" The trainer or owner, the third leg of racing's 3-legged stool, heads out to his or hers usual spot, stopwatch in hand, snagging first a steaming beverage. The mountain air chills. It's a brilliant Santa Anita morning. Welcome, welcome to Coffee at Clockers. Who am I? Well, you know me as Carrie Devereux, but my name at SA, as us insiders call it, I was nicknamed Queen A. Queen B was my friend Mary. We were inseparable during our mornings at Clockers, looking back through photos I took during my racing time in Southern California on the West Coast Circuit. Well, it's my step back into joy. I was happy. I was with Horse. Horse has been my heart since the day I could imagine and remember, long before Bobby Flay was choosing thoroughbred owner over time spent with grills on the Food Network. My best friend growing up was 17 hands high, a Palomino gelding with a head so big I nicknamed him Football. Football head, that is. His real name was Trojan. Trojan was a cast-off from E.P. Taylor's Thoroughbred Farms. Big, clumsy. But he was still a thoroughbred, just not of racing quality. Trojan's imperfection to them was perfection to me. I remember communing with him in the fields beyond our farmhouse. We'd head out, bareback, just a string of twine over his lower jaw to guide with. Hours later, we'd head back. Sometimes all we had done is stand, silent, in silence, listening to nature, feeling the breeze. I'd lean into the broad of his ample back until I was one with him. I heard one day about a racetrack out there, gestured with a general hand waved south of our farm, so I decided Trojan and I would head over. Well, my mom had other ideas. One word, no. Mom caught us as we headed on to the concession south. I was told we couldn't go. So, defiantly, Trojan and I stood at the roadside until I was ready to cave. It felt like hours. Pride and want are big things, and pride has a way of humbling. It begets humiliation or humility. I never gave up on want. One day I grew up. Life changed. I left Trojan. My times seeing him were less and less. Eventually, I never went back, but it's my love for Trojan that started my foray into the world of horse and into the best and worst of people, a crash course in humanity. For a girl crazy about horse, it was bruising at times, and to this day, Trojan's photo goes with me wherever I move, always, always where I can see him, always, always to make bruises hurt less. Some things just never change, like first love. I found my way to Santa Anita quite by accident. A chance meeting led me to a land before time where secrets are kept. Dreamers are willing to risk their all, and where I began my journey into learning everything one needed to know about politics, globally. Beginner's 101, so to speak, from my time in Washington, D.C., where everyone comes to politic eventually, even horse racing. You see, a trainer I met had creative ideas for this two-legged filly. I think that's the only time I ever left dinner before dessert. Now that's said by a woman who espouses eating dessert first because you may not make it through dinner. But the trainer did give me a takeaway. The trainer had said something about a racetrack in Arcadia. Well, I'd never heard of Arcadia. Now, I'll never forget it. I knew I would find that racetrack, and the moment I did, I was 15 again. One very early morning in the black of dawn, I found my way to historic Santa Anita racetrack. I was home. I was with horse. I found friends that I remember and miss to this very day. I found a new path that took me around into the worlds of kings, queens, sheikhs, sheikhas, and more dogs like the trainer, but I found racing. Albeit decades later, as I look back, I still melt. I would join Queen Bee Mary at Clocker's, leaving my warm, snuggy bed, far so in the morning, driving up little Santa Monica Boulevard past the celebrity's favorite church on the left. I'd weave my way up and over Mulholland, down onto the highway. Often no one was on the road but me. I remember the first time I was singing, "The bear went over the mountain to see what she could see." Up the hill, over the mountains. Man, I saw glory. I crested the hill as the sun began its morning climb. And as I continued my morning drives, if I was luckier, I would wave in past Santa Anita security, stepping onto Clocker's in time to watch dewdrops in the infield glitter gold, marveling at horses brushstroked from grays to bronze, then powdered in shimmer. Sometimes our friend Jackie would join us. I'd take photos. Well, George, he would forever be regaling Mary and I with stories about horse owners, sports teams the owners owned, and their athletes in the news. OJ was headlines back then. One day Lave, Barry's dad, smiled at me. Lave never smiled. Lave never spoke. He asked me to sit down and told me stories of being a boy surviving the Holocaust. Lave even gave me a news clipping of the man the British government awoke horror memories of within him. Lave had tried a lifetime to forget. Lave said it was like dying twice inside. And when it came time for me to leave for Europe, Lave didn't want me to go, nor did I want to. But my heart told me it was time. Cameras have a way of freeing people and melting cultural borders. Around the world, it was always the same. The backstretch folk would call out, "Take my picture, please." So I did. The print I would give them, I learned more often than not, they sent home, wherever that was. England, Ireland, France, West Coast, East Coast, down south, dirt tracks, in time even Dubai. Many times this being their first picture in years to show family they left behind they had made it, or were going to. And that's the addiction of racing. being one out from the big win, the big ride, the big score. Every bug boy has their dream of becoming the race jockey on a sure winner. More often than not, that would never become their reality. But they were happy to have the chance to do what they loved most, ride, not just anywhere, but at Santa Anita. Maybe they weren't atop a Preakness winner, but to riders elsewhere in the world, these bug boys had made it. They had bragging rights, breezing horses at the jewel track of racing. Between morning workouts and races, I'd wander and snap more photos of the backstretch and front yards, taking photos of silked mini jockey statues holding rings, Art Deco spires, and of the signature center court fountain that's missing a few years from those years carved into the fountain's stone base. I did ask why a few years were missing. I got no answer. Nothing. My answer found me. I was photographing the ring. A smallish Japanese man with a red umbrella held high above his head was leading a line of men and women just like a mama duck leads with her babies following behind. The man's group stopped, clustered. Their moment was silence. When the group left, I saw a podium, marble with a plaque on its top I'd never noticed before. It was out of place with its surroundings. It blended almost like it wasn't meant to be seen. Brown, straight, terse. It was unlike the horse statues nearby. It was unlike the topiary horses near the entry. It was unlike the Maltese cross or the bus of great jockeys, one with his dog eternally, adoringly looking up at him. Yet it is by far the most significant statuary on Santa Anita's grounds, commemorating an undeservingly shamed people and shaming undeservedly a sport, neither of whom asked for their infamy in history. The words I read moved me. I had not known of this racing secret. Nobody mentioned it all my time we'd be sharing laughter and latte early morning at Clocker's, or race time sharing corned beef and handmade chips. Most of my racing friends never knew of this infamy. Others did. Jockey Cory Nakatani descended from Camp Santa Anita internees. He knew each time he climbed aboard a horse the blemished history of his racetrack, yet each day Cory would breeze and ride, and he would win. Success can be the sweetest revenge. And I've not forgotten the podium. This podium inspired me to discover its truth, an answer that is impactful 70 years later. Long before technology disrupted our world, data was king. The U.S. government knew then where every Japanese, American, and immigrant would be found within seconds, just as today the government knows details of our lives, trust of a people. Back then, the Japanese in America trusted Eleanor Roosevelt. The enemy aliens told Franklin Roosevelt themselves where they were to be found, just as we do today. World War II. The greatest race run was not at Santa Anita during the war years. Santa Anita ceased being a racetrack. Santa Anita became a lockup, an internment camp in the blush of Pearl Harbor's massacre of Americans by Japanese forces. Enemy aliens, including American Japanese, were locked into Santa Anita racetrack. They were overseen by armed guards. A woman I met, a girl back then during World War II, told me she knew she was safe the minute she saw Seabiscuit's statue as she walked through the gates into her temporary home. She was in Seabiscuit land, Santa Anita racetrack, commemorated these days with a movie, and free trolley tours around the track today. Imagine, I couldn't. But my questions led me to answers and to new discoveries. I even found the U.S. government's report on how to lock the Japanese up in the camps. The book, written in teeny tiny print, never gelled with me. I was unsettled until I could understand how the government knew where to find the enemy aliens. They locked up more than just Japanese. The enemy aliens included Wally Dunn, a Santa Anita Canadian trainer. Wally told me he was given 2 weeks to close up his barns and get back to Canada. The U.S. government told Wally they would close his barns for him if he had stayed, and they said they would confiscate his horses. The draw and the magnet of Santa Anita is strong. Wally left, only to return after the war. A few years back, I was photographing Star Trek's Mr. Sulu. We know him as George Takei. And the story was on Takei's imminent marriage. Takei told the writer that Takei was the founder of the Japanese-American National Museum in Los Angeles, Little Tokyo. At the end of the interview, I reintroduced myself to Takei, this time not as a news photographer, but as an international racing photographer that photographed at Santa Anita for a few years. I told George I had a copy of the U.S. government's final report, Japanese evacuation from the West Coast. Oh, you should have seen his face. George Takei wanted that report, so I sent Takei a copy by FedEx, just as he requested. I never heard back from him. Not even a thank you. Nothing.